On this week's mailbag episode, Tampa Bay gets themselves Ha-Seong Kim. Jack Flaherty signs a short-term deal with the Detroit Tigers. Should the Padres have been involved? I don't know. We got to discuss that, man. Manny Machado might be a conspiracy theorist, and answering your questions from not just the Dodger haters, as always, which is just frankly a lot of fun, and of course, a bunch more on the future of the Padres. Should they re-sign Michael King? What is the baseball equivalent of the Luka Doncic trade? It's going to be a fun one. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Tuesday, February 4th. As always, I'm your host with sometimes, occasionally, but certainly not always the most, Javier Reyes. Today's episode is brought to you guys by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play and more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Customers can now bet just $5, and if you win, you can score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. And getting started with today's episode, guys, just, the housekeeping, just to start things off. I know that this is now, I think, the second week in a row that I've done the mailbag on a Tuesday. My apologies. I believe we are heading to full 5 days a week next week. So don't worry, you will get your mailbag on Monday. I don't know. I just have had like a really weird last few Sundays where I just was like, you know what, I'll just record in the morning and then I forget and then I record Tuesday. So whatever. My apologies for that. We will get back to the regularly scheduled themes and whatnot. And I'll even, as we get closer to the end of the week, describe a little bit more how this podcast, what kind of content you can expect coming back when we're out of off-season mode, which I believe is next week, although don't quote me on that. Today's episode, guys, we're going to be talking about a bunch of things relating to signings, relating to some rumors, and it's going to be fun. I'm really excited about it, and I think that this is it's not exactly the best time to be a Padres fan, for sure, and that's why I wrote about it over at Just Baseball. Go check that out. I wrote an article about just a fun one, just power ranking the most miserable moments of the offseason. I just think it'd be really fun if you guys want to go check that out. So please do. And of course, if you have questions that we're going to get into in a little bit for me about the Padres, or frankly about anything, I don't care what you guys ask me. I really don't. I've answered questions on here back in the day, especially. I know I have more listeners now, but I've answered questions on the Avengers. I've answered questions on favorite drinks and smoothies, like everything. You know what I mean? So you can ask me whatever. Focus on baseball, but honestly, I'm down for whatever you guys want, right? I mean, especially nowadays, I feel like we've had like a crazy blitz of news, not just baseball, but just in general, over the past like week. I'm not making a politics allusion, although that's certainly part of this too. This just been like a crazy set of news over the past few days. Like, I genuinely don't know what's coming next. You know what I mean? Football, baseball, basketball, all sorts of stuff. So it's a good time to be a sports fan, I think. Has been really, really fun. So yeah. Be sure to go check that out. And of course, guys, if you want to send those questions, either leave a comment in the YouTube description or follow me on Twitter at Javipeno, Javiipeno, Twitter/X, and Blue Sky at the same handle. Now let's get into it. I've been farting along. I've been procrastinating on this long enough. First thing I want to talk about really quickly is Ha-Seong Kim. Signed with the Tampa Bay Rays, 2 years, $29 million. We got a couple questions about him at the end of the show that I'm going to get into. And also, I believe tomorrow's episode, I'm going to be talking with Ulysses Sembrano and Kevin Weiss of Locked On Rays to talk about Ha-Seong Kim. Maybe like a proper farewell address, because I didn't really have time to do it on Friday and, today as well. But he really was a beloved Padre. He really was. So we're going to get into him in a little bit. But let's talk about Jack Flaherty really quickly. He signed with the Detroit Tigers after very publicly just tweeting about how bored he was and how much he wanted to get a deal done. And he signed with the Detroit Tigers on a 2-year, $35 million deal. And it comes with a player option, I believe, after this season, right? So I think that there's a couple things here. I have a lot of reactions to this. Number one, I think Jack Flaherty was the last remaining impact pitcher on the market. So I think that there was some hope by some Padres fans, perhaps misguided hope. I think if you had hope that the Padres are making a move for him, like, you haven't been paying attention to just like the in general like sadness and the in general ownership strife. And I think that until the main control person is figured out, I don't think you'll see this team making many big moves like that. I also think that Jack Flaherty is not a pitcher that is without any risk, but Jack Flaherty was really good last year. like really, really good. 3.17 ERA, 3.48 FIP. His strikeouts came back. His control came back, more importantly. And in general, he just seemed a lot healthier. And he's 28 years old. So I don't think that, like, this is a pitcher that... I think that he was probably looking for a bigger deal than was out there. And I think that what happened as well is that he had a really bad stretch for like 3 years, or mostly like 2 years, where he just wasn't healthy and wasn't pitching all that much. And everyone was like, I think the arm is just gone. It's just totally shot. And he came back. He was okay. He had some moments in 2023, but it was really this year when he really broke out and did a lot better. He didn't necessarily he wasn't as incredible with the Dodgers, I believe, this year, if I'm not mistaken, this past season. I think he was just a little bit down, but he's still a really quality pitcher, and I think that he's the one that has a decent upside of being great. There's a reason why he was a top-level guy at one point, a top-level desire at one point, right? Yeah, his ERA was 3.58 with the Dodgers, so it was still good, just a little bit up from the 2.95 before. I actually think that this is the type of contract you sign when there wasn't a big deal out there, and I think that we've kind of, because of the concerns, like, where did this come from? I don't believe it. He was bad for so long and then just broke out. It's reminding me a little bit of a lot of players that we talk about these days, right? From your Cody Bellingers to your Jurickson Profars to now Jack Flaherty. That I do think, though, that people have kind of reverse jinxed, what's the word? Like, kind of reversed themselves into thinking Jack Flaherty's bad now. When my thing is, the going rate for a lot of starting pitchers is so high right now that, like, an option deal is like incredible, and I think more people should have been in on this. I just think the fact that you could get Jack Flaherty for probably less, let's pretend it was a full contract. I think there's a world in which he would have settled for like $75 million, but I could be wrong. He's probably just trying to, pitch his butt off this year and then go get paid by the Dodgers next year, right? So we'll see how that pans out, but I have to admit, it is a little bit depressing that the Padres weren't in on this, because this is the type of player that, if he does well for the team, great. He opts out. You had him 1 year, especially for a team that is allegedly built for trying to win now. And then if he doesn't do bad, then you just have him for 1 more year. I feel like that's something that I wish they could have maybe convinced ownership on, right? Like, the AAV isn't that bad, 17.5 million. Like, that's a lot less than a lot of starting pitchers are getting. Most starting pitchers, and I talked about this with Locked On Diamondbacks host Miller Thomas, that, like, starting pitcher market is very, like, 20 million seems to be the going rate for, like, everybody right now. So I'm a little bit surprised by that. He's obviously, betting on himself, biding his time. I think it's an awesome, awesome deal for the Tigers. I think it's an awesome deal for any type of smaller market team. But it's really funny that his market just never materialized. So I guess he was like, okay, I guess I got to do this again. I don't get it. And frankly, we're going to talk about the Dodgers in a little bit, because I always get commentators talking about them like every week. I think this is a slight microcosm of the problem with baseball, where it's like, why is it only Detroit? Like, why is it Cleveland interested? Cleveland won the division last year. They were in the ALCS. You know what I mean? Like, those are the type of teams that I think are ruining baseball a little bit more than the Dodgers. So that's just, not that it matters what I say. You know what I mean? I could like clarify my points on what I mean when I say the Dodgers are bad for baseball, and like getting into the minutia and nuance of it, but I'm still going to get annoying comments every week. But I guess it's just an occupational hazard, guys. What can I say? So yeah, those are my thoughts on Jack Flaherty. I would have loved to see him there, but you know what? Whatever, it happens. The next thing we got to talk about, though, is Michael King, who settled on a deal in arbitration. Bunch of different articles on this. I read the one from the San Diego Union Tribune. Basically, they settled on arbitration, which was great. I didn't want to have a Corbin Burns-esque storyline following the Padres into training camp, where like they were stingy over like $1 million. Basically, the deal that they agreed to basically helps out the Padres for this year. It basically means that their AAV is a little bit lower than like it won't count towards the luxury tax nearly as much as maybe they had wanted, or as some people might have expected. But basically, reading from MLB Trade Rumors, just the lowdown of it. Avoid arbitration hearing with a creative deal that guarantees King $7.75 million. The deal splits that guarantee between a signing bonus and the buyout on a 2026 mutual option, in addition to his 2025 salary, in order to slightly ease some of the financial issues facing San Diego as they look to upgrade their roster this winter. Despite the side's ability to come together on an unusual solution to their dispute over King's salary for this year, however, the right-hander told reporters, including Jeff Sanders of San Diego Tribune, at the Padres Fan Fest event today, which I think was like Saturday or whatever, that he has not been approached regarding a long-term extension that would keep him in San Diego beyond the 2025 season. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, and we're going to unpack it more in just a bit and get, of course, into the mailbag questions, guys. But first, I need to take a break and talk to you about one of our sponsors, and you just heard them at the top of the show, and that is our good friends over at FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities. Or if you're, cynical, you're like, no, there's actually not endless possibilities. The Chiefs are going to win again. But regardless, there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, betting on the coin toss, Gatorade color, what movie trailers they'll show. I don't know about the last two necessarily, but they really do have prop bets for basically everything, because the Super Bowl is basically practically an national holiday, not international, national holiday here. And you want to get on the action. So with live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from the kickoff to the final whistle. It's really great, guys. And all you have to do is place $5 and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl. That's the icing on the cake, folks. So download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets, bucks, folks. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. And just like that, everybody, we are thriving and vibing back into the Locked On Padres podcast. Woo! Of course, everybody, remember, follow me on Twitter /X and Blue Sky at Javipeno, JAVIIPENO. Send me your questions and comments, because we will be answering them every Monday for rest of eternity, probably. Yeah, rest of eternity. It's a long time. Also wanted to note that I think that the Michael King settlement could signal that I think Dylan Cease is probably the pitcher between the two that's likely on the market, while I think that Michael King could be a guy that, depending on how the Padres are, which me personally, I don't think they're going to be very good this year. That's where I'm settling on right now. It's close, though. It's very close. But he might be someone maybe at the deadline that gets moved, depending on how he pitches. But hey, if there's one positive for the Padres, is both of these guys will be super motivated as incoming free agents to do well. I think contract year thing gets a little bit overstated, because there are players that don't do well contract years, right? Like you look at Gleyber Torres, right? Had two really underrated good years for the Yankees, then stinks this past year for them in his contract year, despite having plenty of lineup protection and all that. They didn't need much for him, still wasn't very good. It happens sometimes, not doing well in the contract year. What can I say? But, we will see what happened. Other news from the past week, Mike Shildt confirmed Xander Bogaerts will play shortstop. No surprise there. Xander Bogaerts is kind of it's really scary, man. It's really scary. And someone actually reached out to me on Blue Sky, by the way, about like an article they wrote, basically. My man, Aaron, who wrote an article just on a positive perspective for the Padres, and was like, hey, Xander Bogaerts' slash line, like, he should hit better. And my thing is like, he should, but the problem is that the advanced stats show us that he is getting infinitely worse. He does not swing at first strikes anymore. It's basically automatically he's in an 0-1 count all the time. He has a huge wrist problem that is clearly affecting him. The hard hit rate has declined every single year. His weighted on base has declined every single year. It's rough. And I think that it's really concerning that there wasn't, at least reported, any injury last year, despite the fact that he did a lot better in the second half of his first year with the Padres, which is why I was really optimistic about him. I figured, okay, you can literally trace why he had a bad first year to when he got hit on his wrist. And then all of a sudden he's just awful this year and he can't walk anymore. It's really rough with him. But anyway, he's actually okay at shortstop. Like, he's fine. You know what I mean? He does decent work there. I think it's going to be interesting to see what they do more at first base. If they sign another bat, which at this rate is probably like a really low floor, a little like low ceiling, I should say, kind of bat. Maybe they put Eggy Rosario at DH a lot. I don't know if I want him being always the DH. I feel like he would be a better platoon guy, but we'll see, right? So we'll see how that goes. But I think that all intents and purposes, the Arise Cronenworth thing, I'd love Arise to be the DH on some days, and then maybe you use Eggy on some days when it's the right platoon split. And then you have Cronenworth back at second base, where I think he could do some damage defensively. Even if the last time he did play their full season, his advanced stats weren't great. Like last year, he did play a decent amount of second base. He actually didn't have great defensive stats, which is weird. Maybe it's them moving him around and making him become a first baseman and messed him up. But whatever. That's news. So shout out to Mike Shildt. Stating the obvious, but it's still worth mentioning. Manny Machado. this past week at FanFest, he says he gets the feeling, and I'm reporting this, I'm reading this from 97.3 The Fan. Manny Machado says that he doesn't believe the ownership dispute impacted Roki Sasaki's decision with LA. Manny added that he had a gut feeling that Sasaki already had his mind made up when he met with the Padres. It's stuff like this, which is why I think that Roki's going to get booed like crazy at Petco. Some of it I don't really agree with, right? Like, my thing is kind of like, dude, if you're going international, like, if you were going to another country, wouldn't you want to be around as many friends of yours as possible? Or at least people you know what I mean? At least people who you relate to culturally. So, like, I don't fault him for that. But I can emphasize with the idea that I have been of the opinion, or at least I've been the opinion of not dismissing the opinion that Roki Sasaki, it just feels like it's possible he made the decision a while ago, and in order to avoid tampering, they had to put up this idea that all these teams were in it. It just happened too quickly. It's weird that the White Sox got a call. Like, MLB has to put on this, not MLB, but the teams have to put on this ruse that this was a sweepstakes, when really it wasn't. I think it's clear that it was like 90% Dodgers, 10% Padres. And I think that they were just trying to avoid the tampering charges potentially. I don't like that MLB did an investigation and it lasted a day and a half. I was like, what? Even like the most minute, even the most benign type of things that happen in sports usually takes like a little bit longer than that to conclude an investigation. So, and by the way, not saying the Padres didn't tamper. They very clearly probably did too. I think everybody did. I just personally think it was only two teams, and I think he probably decided on the Dodgers early on. But then again, it's not like we should 100% believe everything Manny Machado says, the same way we shouldn't believe everything apparently Dave Roberts says, right? So that's what I think. But I do think it's possible that he chose beforehand. And I just think that there's just a weirdness, right? And I just think that it was, I don't know. I just personally think that he probably decided sooner. But it could be me, and it's why everybody's upset, and it's probably why he's going to get booed a lot of places. You took all that time just to say, I want to be a bonus piece that they don't even need. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's what fans are thinking, is they're like, you needed to take like 3 months to decide I'd rather pitch for 50 innings on a team that'll win the World Series without me. Like, I just don't see the kind of connection there. But whatever, we'll see how it all shakes up. And frankly, I'm kind of rooting for him because it seems like he's had a tough life, Roki Sasaki. Go look up the piece in The Athletic about his life with the tsunami and whatnot that he went through, where he lost a lot of family members. So I'm rooting for him in that regard for sure. Just not rooting for the Dodgers. You know what I mean? So maybe we'll beat him up maybe in outings, right? Everyone else, he could do well, I guess, whatever. But that was just like a note thing that I thought was interesting, and it's not picking up too much steam, but whatever. Speaking of the Dodgers, though, last thing I saw was that the Dodgers are doing a bunch of handouts of like World Series trophy replicas when they play the Padres specifically, which is just trolling at its finest. Blake Snell bobblehead, I believe, is going to be one of those. I maintain my belief that it is really funny, like how much they will get really puff their chests out at the Padres for understandable reasons. It's the division rival, and the Padres give it right back sometimes. But then, like, I don't see them doing this to any other team because they have had a weird history with every other team. So I just think it's a little bit, it just seems really, the reason I've been complaining about the Dodgers thing is very like, I just think it's so weird to be so smug, so in your face and wiling out over like, guys, this league is messed up. And you're doing well, but a big part of that is that no other team tries, I think, is my short end of it. Doesn't matter what I say, Dodgers fans are still gonna like threaten me and say mean stuff or whatever, and I don't really care, but whatever. That's my thoughts on that. Last thing, PECOTA projections just came out at the time of me recording this. I don't really think PECOTA projections matter, but they do always get a lot of attention. So I do want to mention really quickly that they did like their projections. It's like a system that they do basically. And Codify tweeted out 2025 World Championship chances with 21.6% chance. They have the Dodgers, and then the next highest is the Yankees at 9.4. Then the Braves 8.5, Cubs 7.5, Rangers 7.2, Orioles 7, Houston, Mets, blah blah. And if you're curious, they have the Padres and the Brewers with the same amount of odds, 0.7%. which is frankly hilarious. I like the idea that the Kansas City Royals, after like 1 year of being decent and having only 2 batters, and they didn't really make enough additions this offseason, that they have a higher chance to win the World Series. That's weird to me, but whatever. I think that this is just a reminder that the projection things are just not a good way to go about things sometimes. Like the things that project the win totals, I think is really rough, because there's a bunch of reasons that even if players play well, that you just might not win games. The 2023 Padres are a great example, right? People keep forgetting Xander Bogaerts was a 4.5 wins above replacement player that year, and he did not feel like it, right? So that's why the projections are not always great, right? And if you're curious, the Zips projections for Xander Bogaerts this year, I believe, are up, and they have him being like a 3-win player. They have him being a lot better this year, but I personally am just really worried about it. The only thing going in Xander Bogaerts' favor right now is, wait, it can't be that bad, right? You know what I mean? Like, it's almost like he's been so bad, you kind of have to, just for some reason, he should get better. And that kind of is why I'm not really high on the Padres this year, because you're relying on Xander Bogaerts to all of a sudden figure things out. But again, we shall see. But again, don't take the PECOTA projections or any team final win total projections too seriously. 21% chance to win the World Series, not make the playoffs, right? I have no issue if they're like, yeah, Dodgers have a 100% chance to make the playoffs. Yeah, that is true. World Series odds, that's a little bit much, guys. Like that's really crazy. Like anyone has the odds once they make in the playoffs to win the World Series. So that's just me. But guys, we just got to take one more break before we get into some questions from you folks, you fine, lovely, lovely, lovely folks. But first, a word from our sponsors. And just like that, everybody, we are back into the mailbag segment of the podcast. First comment, I should say, from @ChurchofChristGuyRob. I don't mind that Kim went to another team. Even though I do like him, I don't believe he was that great of a player, and we don't know what the offseason has in store for us until spring training is over, so I can't judge whether it has been a good one or not. I appreciate your optimism and the idea that, like, we got to wait until the offseason is over to make a judgment. I think it's clear that the Padres are in, like, really bad shape, and they probably won't be making too many more moves, but I also agree that we should wait a little bit more and just see what the final additions are, because they could very well sign, like, a JD Martinez, and I don't think that that's, like, an amazing move, but it at least gives the team another piece, another option, another, side to their team, another aspect of their team to maybe move things around with the first base and second base and DH stuff. So we'll see how that goes. Another Ha-Seong Kim thing from @CamWordplay. 2024 was a real disappointment for HSK right from the start. The Soul Series could have been his coming out party, and all he could manage was a sac fly. First of all, Cam, that's good, right? Like, he made several errors early on, and his hitting regressed from 2023. That is true. Finally, the shoulder injury came from a routine dive on a pickoff that didn't look serious at all, yet it kept him from being part of the playoff excitement. So by October, he was kind of Mr. Irrelevant. It looked like a very bad time to test the free agent waters, but I guess $13 million for a shortened season says otherwise. It's shocking to see a team like the Rays overpay for a mediocre bat and a questionable arm, but at least he's not going to the Dodgers or someone else in our division. I wish him well. We'll miss him. Ha-Seong Kim is not overrated, like, at all. This is like a really quality second baseman that even when he's not hitting, he still produces, right? This is a guy, just to give you an idea, Ha-Seong Kim last year had a 2.6 wins above replacement in 121 games. Year before that, 4.2. Year before that, 3.6. He's one of the best defensive players in baseball, right? And he's an average bat. He had a 101 WRC plus. So yes, his bat did regress a bit. He wasn't walking as much. He wasn't getting as many hits. That is true. But overall, if you're just a really ace defender and you have average 105, 110 WRC plus batting skills, that's a really good player. And getting him for just $14 million a year is insane, right? Like, that's actually an insanely good deal for the Rays. So I disagree. That's not an overpay whatsoever. And frankly, guys, any short-term deal is not an overpay. It's baseball. These owners can afford whatever they want, right? That's just me. Drew Walkwell 8000 left a lot of comments. Nope, Dodgers are just outsmarting everyone in baseball. This is referring to my video titled "No Hope Against LA," I guess. Nope, Dodgers are just outsmarting everyone in baseball. Are on top of end. Can spend a lot of money, so the result is this. Have to respect it. Dodgers would still be the best if they were a salary. They are just the best run organization right now, like Yankees used to be in the 90s and 2000s. You guys are mad that the Dodgers are doing their job. Getting the best players, that is what they're supposed to do. Tell your owners to spend and run your organization better and hire better. I only highlight this because, one, love unbiased Dodgers fans in my comments, and I love 3 comments on the same video. I think that it's like 80%, maybe 75%, the Dodgers being really well run, and then a lot of money involved. Guys, stop looking at me and trying to be like in good faith, being like, it doesn't matter that we have $1.7 billion in deferred payments. It's all skill and talent, right? It's like, no, the money is a big part of this. It also affords you the freedom to be able to not have to trade people before you want to, right? Like, you don't have to trade Trey Turner. Other teams, if they have a half season Trey Turner, they have to trade them. Now, here's the thing. That's not the Dodgers' fault. It's more that baseball has a bunch of teams that don't try. We had Hal Steinbrenner the other day talking about how we can't compete against them. And I'm like, you made more in revenue from the Dodgers. The Yankee hat probably gives you enough money to sign a $200 million player. Just the Yankee hat sales alone. You know how many people know what the Yankee hat is and wear it, and they don't care about baseball or the Yankees? Or freaking America, frankly. Like, it could be an international thing for all I know. So I'm just like, it's patently absurd for people like Hal Steinbrenner and Tom Ricketts of the Cubs to pretend that they're poor. And frankly, it is feeling a little bit like owners and teams might be letting this happen so that way they can, cry poor and like complain when the CBA negotiations come up. That's a vibe that I've been getting. But in general, I just don't agree with this idea that money has nothing to do with what the Dodgers are doing right now. At Alex the God 2 says, I love people pointing to the salary cap being a successful example of allowing teams to compete. Brady went to 10 Super Bowls and won 10 games a year for 20 years. Now Mahomes is going to Super Bowl number 5 while winning 10 games every year of his career. Again, I know, longtime listeners, it's kind of a waste of time for me to engage with comments like this because clearly the people who leave these comments don't actually watch the video or listen to what I have to say, audio or video. Listeners, we don't discriminate. We love you. However you're here, we appreciate that you're here. Ooh, sorry, I had to take a little bit of a cut there, guys. I randomly got hiccups in the middle of recording. I understand that like it's a little bit of a waste of time too because people don't watch the full thing. But that being said, my complaint, and I do think that this is what other people are saying. So I do agree that other people are like, what's the point of even watching now? You know what I mean? There's no parity. It's like when you're referring to the Dodgers being a problem because the World Series is over, that's just false. They won this past year. And for a lot of years before that, they were known as choking because they did, right? And not only that, we haven't had a repeat winner since 1999. So it's not the championship that I'm complaining about. It's not that. What I'm complaining about is that there are just like 18 fan bases that are completely disengaged from the sport because only 6 or 7 teams get everybody. It's just a sign of the sport not being in a good place in terms of being engaging. And instead it feels like, this very capitalistic, like rich get richer, poor teams just get to chill. Oh, well, they have a chance. The D-backs made it. Yeah, but if you look at the numbers, you can't really win outside the top half of payroll. And we always have these teams and sometimes in big fan bases and sometimes in very good markets. Like even the Pittsburgh fans are good. You know what I mean? Rockies fans are good. That they're outside the top half of payroll and they're not going to win the World Series. And there's just these teams like the Mariners and Guardians I think are great examples, right? That just don't do anything. And I think that the Dodgers are kind of like, they exemplify what's wrong with the league. Not necessarily what are wrong with the league. Does that make sense? I don't know. Maybe. But at the same time, also it is a little bit like that they they get like $400 million in a TV bill. But whatever, with this revenue share and all that stuff, I'm just saying that like they exemplify a symptom and problem with the league. But it's not just them, it goes deeper than that. I think that it's a problem that like 8 teams every year, they're just like, whatever, they can't be engaged. Meanwhile, you look at the NBA and the NFL that like there is this feeling of hope every offseason. There is this feeling of our team's going to sign some guys. They're not just going to do nothing. That like there's a feeling that when you don't do well in basketball and football, it's because you didn't draft well. While baseball, there's a feeling that it's just because your team owner wants another yacht. That's how I would explain it. But whatever. Let's keep moving. I'm taking way too much time with some of these questions. At Bob Bowie 9350 says, Pods fans are delusional. You can't lose and then say your team was the best team. Dodgers won the division. Yeah, but we're talking about like in that moment. And I actually think Dodgers fans would agree, by the way. Like, I think the Padres choked. I just think the Dodgers at that time, Mookie Betts is struggling, which is one thing. They had a little bit of outfield, not the best production there, but mostly their starting pitching was hurt. Well, the Padres were one of the best offensive teams in baseball, and they had been doing really well in the clutch. They won a lot of close games. Jurickson Profar, Donovan Solano, and Kyle Higashioka were all like lower tier players that just broke out for them. And I just think that they had a better bullpen in some ways, but that's on paper, right? That's what I'm saying. It's kind of like how I think that not this year, but last year, I think the Ravens were the best team in football. We know that by numbers. They were like number 1 in offense, number 3 in defense. And the Chiefs were like number 5 in defense and then number 12 in offense or whatever. Like, I think the Ravens were a better team that year, but they didn't win, if that makes sense. So anyway, moving on. Let me see what else we got. Oh yeah, that's right. My guy Ye Ong, who was on the podcast rather recently. Go check that out. Interviewed him about what it's like being an Australian baseball fan, all sorts of that, and how he became part of the team. He asked me, explain this trade, but using Padres players in reference to the blockbuster trade that even people who only know baseball, you guys probably heard about the Luka Doncic for Anthony Davis trade. I would say the comparison is if the Padres to shake up a little bit of the timeline a tiny bit, I'd say the equivalent would be trading Fernando Tatis Jr. for Mike Trout. I think that's where I'd be at. Where like they're really frustrated off the PED thing. For Luka Doncic, they're really frustrated that he's reportedly frustrated that he's overweight and he's, got some problem, no defense. I like trading a young Tatis for a very good player in Mike Trout, who's also got issues of like, being injury prone and whatnot. That's one of the ones I came up with. Basically, extremely talented, high ceiling young player for very good all-star, much older player is kind of what I'm going for. And also part of this is the idea that like what Tatis means to San Diego and the Padres, what Luka Doncic meant for the Mavericks. Like, it's more than just numbers on a spreadsheet, guys. These players have a huge kinship with their fan base, and like there's a culture that morphs around them, right? Like, it's kind of like if the Yankees had traded Derek Jeter. Like, he means more to that team than people like would ever realize unless you were a Yankees fan. Or the Red Sox trading David Ortiz, or the Dodgers trading Clayton Kershaw, right? That's kind of what I'm looking at here. And it's just crazy. It's crazy that it happened. I was aghast on Saturday night. I woke up anyone that was near me. I texted everybody that was up. I was like, what just happened? I know Mavericks fans are going through it. My thoughts go out to you. Sometimes there's worse things than being a Padres fan. The latest, Dallas Mavericks fan. So thank you for the question, sir. That's kind of how I'm feeling. It would just be, and yeah, I really feel like that's the equivalent. Like this version of Mike Trout that keeps getting hurt all the time, even if he is great. I think that's kind of what we're looking at. And they're like, win now. And it's like, you can win now with Tatis too. What are we doing? So that's really rough. Mr. Ramamurti, 9938. He says, a couple of questions for Monday's show. Should we look at extending Michael King or wait till after the 2025 season? I think that there isn't the possibility of extension, according to the MLB trade rumors and Jeff Sanders. I think that like it's just not on the table right now. Right? If you could, yeah, I think I'd be interested in it. That being said, my God, I'd like to go one off season without like just completely buying in on everything that happened and just having a little bit more flexibility. But again, I just don't think it's on the table. 2, crazy trade proposal. Cease for Vlad Jr. straight up. Could throw some other players in to make it go like Cronenworth and maybe get a catcher of Toronto. No way. Vlad Jr. is way, way, way more valuable than Dylan Cease, in my opinion. This is a guy who potentially could be a top 3, top 2, number 1 first baseman. He hit like an absolute behemoth last year. And first base is one of those positions where you kind of have to hit like a behemoth monster, demigod in order to make it worth it, because you don't get as much defensive value. First base defense matters the least, it seems, compared to all the other positions, except pitcher, obviously. But in terms of the non-pitchers, that seems to matter the least. And Vlad was like, if you guys are wondering, since, let me see if I can find it really, really quickly. After June 19th, Vlad Jr. was slashing 359, 420, 665 with a 200 WRC plus. Yeah, Dylan Cease ain't worth that, and they're not doing that. And also, they're fully committed on going for it now, it seems, based on their offseason moves. Are we overlooking that Mike Schilt is the kind of manager who can work with whatever AJ provides him with and make it work and will still be a playoff team? A little bit. I think Mike Schilt has been very good. He had success with the Cardinals, too, before the Padres, so he's definitely a very high-quality manager. But I will say that it's only been 1 year. Like, we don't know for sure. Jace Tingler people liked after 1 year because the team was good. And then guess what? Turns out he wasn't very good. So, and Bob Melvin, and any of the, frankly, the 9 managers that AJ Preller has hired and fired, right? Like, it's been 1 year. Like, we don't know for sure that Mike Schilt is the next, what's that dude's name on the Rangers? The guy who used to do the Giants? Bobby? I'm blanking on his name right now. This is really embarrassing. But yeah, I think he could be good, but also it's important to note that manager's important, but it's not as important as, players and other things. And it's not as important as the head coach position in other sports. At least that's just my opinion. Let me see if I can find this real. Bruce Bochy, thank you, God. I am just losing it today, folks. What can I tell you? Moving on, though, with the questions before we conclude. Just a quick thing. At Gilbert Castaneda 6931, the curse of the Kershaw crying meme. I don't understand why the Kershaw crying meme is treated like it was a hate crime. Like, I don't know why. And this is just the internet. Let me be clear. This is not the vast majority of Dodger fans. I don't know why that's treated as a hate crime. And then I have had for 6 months people stressing to me why it's okay to throw beer at Jurickson Profile Fernando Tatis Jr. Like, I don't understand the equivalent there. That is like, go watch the episode of The West Wing called Proportionate Response, guys. You know what I mean? So that's my response to that. I just don't get it. Soft. If you are one of the, I imagine very few Dodgers fans that are acting like the crying curse, it's a meme. What are we doing? Why are you acting like that's the worst thing? If anything, the biggest curse that the Padres have had was you could argue that the Manny Machado's throwing the ball into the dugout was more of a, don't do that. It's still dumb, right? Like, because again, they threw beer, Machado threw a ball lightly into a dugout. But I think the other thing would be like the Padres screwed themselves with that dance from that group of older dudes. That's what's in. Manny's gonna cruise. That is the curse, and that's been the curse of this team ever since. I swear. Moving on though, let me see here. At Carlos Rules, not a great time to be a baseball fan. Can't take that too serious from a Padres fan, but being a fan of other teams, there are lots of other things going on. Royals, emergence of Bobby Witt Jr. being contenders. D-backs, great team adding guys and had just made a World Series. Rangers will probably be contenders this year. Yankees just signed some dudes. Red Sox creeping back into contention. Great young stars. Orioles youth movement finally paying off. Mets adding Juan Soto. Braves getting healthy. Perennial contenders. Phillies, they're in Phillies. Or they're the effing Phillies. Brewers get great rookie, nice core, probably won the NL Central. Those are all things MLB fans can be excited about. I agree. And again, it's not just about that. I think that the problem with the Dodgers thing, you guys heard me before, it's not just about the winning. It's about what it says about the league that in order to win a World Series, you have to spend. That it's just not being spread out, right? Or more importantly, that the excitement isn't being spread out. Team fan bases are just so dejected. It's not a good product when some fans are like, yay, our AA guy got promoted to AAA. And then the other team is like, yay, we just added an all-star we don't even need. You know what I mean? That's kind of what I think is the problem with the league. But again, I could be wrong. Last one, Todd Davis, 3731. The loss of Profar really doesn't disappoint me that much, seeing how much he would have cost dollar-wise. But you need to sign someone to replace his production. And trading away King makes zero sense at all and just goes to show what a sad state the ownership of the team has become. This confirms that the Padres need to be sold immediately to a competent ownership group that will take the team to a competitive level while the core of the team is still in their primes, which will only be for 2 or 3, possibly 4 more years. How frustrating it is to have a team on the brink of possibly winning it all, just to see them lose key pieces bit by bit because ownership can't afford to pay more. Unfair to the fan base who have shown that if you put together a winner, they will support you fully. Sell the team before it's too late. I just don't think selling the team is something that they can do immediately. Frankly, like I think it's going to take time. We'll see. But I agree with most of what you said. Like it's really unfortunate that in a league that it is really healthy to see small market teams spend a lot and kind of transform their philosophy the way that the Padres did, kind of making all those other teams look bad that pretend they don't have any money. If the Padres have money, I promise you the Cubs do and the White Sox do, right? That whether it be for mismanagement, in the case of, say, some of the people they've hired, whether it be in the case of AJ Preller, perhaps getting a little bit too aggressive with some of the contracts they did. Like if they don't hand out extensions to Darvish and Bogarts, can they make a move this offseason? Maybe there's more versatility. Maybe they keep Kim for 2 years, 29. At this rate, I'm ready to do that instead of Bogarts. Yeah, There's some fault of them. And then, of course, there's just the fact of reality, which is that Peter Seidler passed. And this didn't get sorted out for whatever reason. Maybe there's some foul play, which is what Shield is alleging, key word there. But whatever it is, it's sad. It is sad that it seems like things are falling apart for something that is beyond baseball, really, beyond the on-field product, which is just, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. But even still, someone told me the other day, they were like, Javi, you still got Jackson Merrill, Fernando Tatis Jr. You know what I'm saying? Like, you still have some good players, and like, there are other teams that don't care at all. So at least you have some stuff, right? And I'm like, agreed. But I think it's important to head into this Padres season with a tepid amount of optimism and just being excited to watch the Padres and being excited to watch stars. I would not expect like high championship caliber stuff at the moment. I just think it never ages well when you make it this far. Then your ownership has turmoil, and then you don't sign anybody. It's usually not the reason, the formula for success. But again, I could be wrong. But with that all being said, guys, that about does it for today's edition of the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Remember to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. Follow me on Twitter/X at Javapeno and Blue Sky as well, JAVIIPENO. Tomorrow, probably going to talk about Ha-Seong Kim, the Rays, in general baseball stuff. It should be a lot of fun with my guy Ulysses. We just haven't done a crossover in a while, and I don't know what I'm doing for the last episode of the week just yet. Maybe some news will drop, but either way, we'll figure it out. And until that next time, everybody, stay safe and, of course, stay faithful. My Friar faithful homies, take care.